keeps it there. Now back to over the line. Here the Canadians. Rangelov, he dropped it back to shot. Oh, my word! I've seen everything now! Run, if you don't get it, grab it. Straight pass over. What a stop by Henrik Lundqvist! You've got to be kidding me. Savard and Murray, 2-on-1, looking back. Savard for Murray. Savard, like man Murray. Never makes a spectacular save.
Live on TBC, Hockey Night in Canada, brought to you by Molson, Brewers of Molson Export. It keeps on tasting great.
Bieksa. His shot tipped in front loose. Oh my goodness! And somehow that stayed up too.
Introduce our guests here today, Pavel.
All right. We got Les back. Les, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I was doing great until I saw that Vancouver jersey behind you again, and that just continues to upset me. And I think Evan's wearing something. I don't understand what's happening tonight. It's an alternate reality, but welcome back. We'd love to get your insight tonight. How you been doing? Did you have a good Easter?
Well, it was nice and quiet. Thank goodness, and just mulling over my Canucks all being in the sick bay.
Oh,
yeah,
so
it's been a tough ride for the Vancouver Canucks. We wish them our best. Our thoughts and prayers that they recover quickly, and that they get back on the ice and are able to finish at least a few more games. Maybe not 56 as planned, but yeah. Well, welcome, Evan. Evan, I see you also got a jersey in the back there. Is that the Quebec Nordiques, but with the Colorado colors?
This is the Colorado retro reverse jersey. Yes, I got Cale Makar, number 8. Brooks Bandit, former guy. So he's played some in the South. So actually, I don't know if you had a chance. Actually, Chris, I'll let you talk. You're going to get introduced in a moment here. So.
Just stealing my thunder, man. You know what, Evan? Come on.
I don't know the guy's name.
But we're very fortunate and lucky to have Chris join us. Chris, welcome. How you doing?
Not too bad, thanks. Thanks for inviting me on.
Thank you for agreeing to this, because I don't think anyone ever says yes to Evan. I mean, I reluctantly did so, but here we are. But we hear you're a WHL linesman, and you've got some great insight and stories about being on the ice and officiating. Is that true?
Partially true, yeah. I'm a retired WHL linesman, but
he's old, man. He's old.
Yes, yeah. But I was fortunate enough to spend 14 years patrolling the ice and breaking up some fights and having a good old time. And yes, I did officiate Cale when he was with Brooks. Evan, I think that's where you're getting at. So.
Pretty good. Well, you were sharing a little bit of a story before we got on air. We'd love for you to share it. Who you were trying to separate in a fight recently?
Well, yeah. So I did have an opportunity when I was working in the Western League. Again, you have a front row seat to some of those great fisticuffs that Wes McCauley would kind of say, all right, 5 minutes each for fisticuffs. But one of the ones that was always that I always remember is Dustin Bufflin when he was with the Prince George Cougars, and Braden Coburn, Philadelphia Flyer there, or former Flyer, I guess. They're definitely a couple of monsters, 6'7", and I'm 6 foot, and they probably all weigh me about 80, 90 pounds as well. So here I am trying to break them up, and with their adrenaline going, I'm just kind of hanging off their arms saying, guys, stop, kind of thing, right? So it's, trying to get between them. So, you have to get creative at times, and, luckily they sort of listened when they calmed down after a little while. So
you feel like a toddler in there. Did you ever get knocked down trying to separate somebody?
Not too much on that aspect. There was a couple times where I took a few punches when we go down to the ground, and one linesman's supposed to kind of protect the guy on the bottom, the other one is supposed to get the other guy, and I've had a few times where the partner didn't grab the other arm, and I take one in the side of the ear or something like that, right? But it's you try to wait till they're done throwing before you get in there. That's rule number one as a linesman, is wait till they're done before you jump in.
So Pavel, before we go there, I just got to go over to Les. So Les, in umpiring, have you had someone try to get in a hassle with you or threaten you face to face or like a fight?
Not in ball. I have seen on other diamonds fisticuffs with players, and the umpires trying to separate players and stuff like that. So it can get unruly at times. Yes.
I always wanted to kick dirt at the ump. I always thought that would be a cool idea, but I only
somebody tried doing that to me once, but he didn't last very long.
Yeah. Problem is I keep my stick on the ice, and I was a goalie, so all I could do is just kind of take shavings of ice and throw it at them. Sorry, Pavel, go ahead.
No. These are some great stories. I mean, I applaud you, Chris, for being able to do the brunt of the work there, and having to separate those two big boys and going through what you did. Unless, you know what, sometimes we all got to get a little dirt in our mouths because it's part of the experience. But speaking of experience, we want to get into a little bit about officiating, and there's been a lot of talks about it, especially recently with the letting go of Tim Peel and the whole controversy there and the open mic there, and just kind of discussing kind of officiating in the sport of hockey. So it's not just the NHL level, we want to talk about at all levels. What does it look like? How do we apply it? Is it fair? Are there makeup calls, things like that? So we wanted to get a little bit of insight from you, Chris, and Les, about what that looks like. Do you think that reffing is going in a good direction for all leagues? Do you think that there's work that needs to be done? Or where's your thoughts on where reffing and officiating is right now?
So let's tie this in just as we go in, because I know we have a load of questions for you guys. Let's talk about Peel first. Let's just get your guys' opinion quickly on that, and then we're going to kind of move into some other questions around this. So what's your thought on what happened? Are you good with the way it was handled? Not good with the way it was handled? What's your thoughts? So, Chris, we'll start with you.
Obviously, when it first happened, I definitely had a few messages from some of my buddies who are fellow referees, or a couple buddies that aren't, and are like, hey, what do you think about this? And it's not a great situation from an officiating standpoint, obviously. Like you said, it's it's the open mic or hot mic or whatever it's called that caught it. Isn't obviously, it's not a good look. Perception is not great, obviously, right? And obviously that's been well documented by lots of different people and in the media and stuff like that. But I think, again, Tim was supposed to be retiring here. I think April 24th was his last scheduled game at the time. And I think he's been a member of the National Hockey Officials since 95, worked his first game in the late 90s, 99 or something like that, I think it was. And, worked close to 1,400 games. And I hate to say that, he also worked these Sochi Olympics as well. But, I think Tim, it's a crappy way for him to end his career, because that's what he's going to be kind of known as. Even though he had a great year, he was definitely a veteran guy that, worked a couple of Heritage Classics or Winter Classics, whatever you want to call it. And stuff like that. So I think it was I don't want to say it was an easy way out for the NHL to say, hey, you're done, and we're going to send a bit of a message to the public. Whether that was or wasn't, I don't know, obviously, right? If that was their rationale. But I think, to summarize that whole situation, I think they dealt with it appropriately. It was an easy fix with his month and a bit left. And it does send a little bit of a message saying, hey, this isn't what we represent. And I know their media statement or whatever definitely kind of talked about that. Some of that. And I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about the makeup calls and a few things about the philosophy of officiating down the road. So, yeah, I guess that would be my general thoughts on it.
Les, your thoughts?
Well, I agree with Chris. I think the NHL just used the situation the best they could. It was unfortunate for him that the microphone was on him. I don't know how serious he was with his comment, or if it was just off the cuff speaking.
Yeah.
Knowing enough officials, I don't know of anyone that actually thinks of doing that all the time, right? It might have just been a spur of the moment thing. And of course, being all over the networks, the NHL had to do something, right? Like Chris said, they don't condone something like that, getting even or anything like that. So they had to do something. And thank goodness that it is the end of his career anyways. So it doesn't hurt him as much. Yes, his legacy might not be as good, but yeah, that's my feeling on it.
Pavel, we never talked about it. We've held on for a little bit with our other shows. Why don't you give everybody your take on your thoughts on it? You like to be vocal about it.
I mean, I wasn't a fan of it. I think the NHL kind of used Tim Peel as a scapegoat, which is my issue, because there's a bigger underlying problem with officiating, which is why we're having the show tonight. Yeah. I think Tim Peel was kind of the person that was, outed for something that we may agree or see upon. And I think that we have to also give credence to the fact that Twitter has a small minority of people with a loud voice that doesn't necessarily represent the majority of the players. And most players, albeit would assume, and Chris, you can correct me if I'm wrong, would say, I don't like this call, or you want a call go in your favor. Of course, you want a power play, you want a man advantage. But sometimes, when I've played ball hockey and I play at a low level, when I got a tripping call, I got called and I wasn't happy and I would just walk off. What's the point of arguing with the coach or the ref or the linesman? Because there's no point, right? Like you did something wrong. But I think the NHL needs to reassess the whole reffing situation, linesman situation. And I've talked to this off air with Evan, is I think they need, like the teams do, is having an after game interview with the refs and the linesmen to kind of go through play by play of what they saw, what they called, and what they deemed to being a penalty. Because I think that would create some accountability. And I also believe that there should be names on the back of the stripes, but that's just my personal opinion. But Evan, what are your thoughts?
So I'll be really quick. I'm going to come in. Actually, Les, you're the first person I've heard said this. I actually think it was an off the cuff remark. Now, this is just total fandom here, but just from hearing and talking, over the years, I think it was a little bit off the cuff. Yeah, maybe he was being kind of snide with his remarks. And I think the NHL likes to make examples of people and throw people under the bus. I'm sorry. They are about the money and they are about looking good. And I don't trust Bettman and company. I trust the players more than I trust the actual commissioner and his boys. So anyway, that's just kind of my opinion. But you brought up a really good point. So why don't we talk to the guys here? You're talking about accountability. I'd like to know, so you guys have done through different sports, and specifically I know as a linesman you've dealt with the hockey world. I'd like to know, is there accountability for officiating? Because I think we all feel like there's not. And then after that, let's talk about actually names on actual, like you got your name Hartley, right? It's just like, how many jerseys now you guys as refs and linesmen? We got nothing on those things anymore. So, okay, first, is there accountability?
If I can take the lead on that, yes, there is. Hands down, there is. There is definitely accountability. Like they are being supervised, evaluated. After the games, they'll get video clips sent to them. The referees will get video clips sent to them about some of their calls or some of that. Like after the game, they are receiving feedback. I remember when I was in the Western Hockey League, we would have officiating coaches or, same also known as supervisors, but they renamed it officiating coaches because just like the players, they were coaching us. Prime example was like Tom Cowell, who was a longtime NHL referee that retired a couple years ago. Tom lives in Okotoks area, and he's since retiring, he's been involved with the Western Hockey League as an officiating coach. So,
okay,
and since I retired, I do video goal judge here in Calgary for some of the Western Hockey League games, and a lot of times there's a supervisor in the rink, but I know for a fact some supervisors will sit at home and they'll have their multiple laptop screens and stuff like that, and have maybe 8 different Western Hockey League games going on. As they're sitting in their living room or in their office watching, even though they're not in person, right? So that they can potentially send a clip to the Western League office and say, "Hey, clip this up to send out to everyone." So there, from that standpoint, there is definitely accountability.
Okay.
And as an official, I'm speaking from a Western Hockey League standpoint, officials, we can get fined, or they could get fined. We'd lose some of our game fees and stuff like that if we, don't know the rules or, screw up big time or do something that's against our policies. There is some stuff like that, that we can either lose game assignments or get fined type thing. And I know in the National Hockey League, obviously it's a performance-based business, that especially come playoff time, each round, it's, you're battling because you want to work that next round. And, it's even more heavily scrutinized. So, there's definitely, like I say, there's that accountability piece. It's, from a officiating standpoint, I think definitely, the guys want to do the good job, right? They want to get the right calls. They want to do that. They're getting, they have their training camps, just like the players have training camps at the start of the year that they go through and say, okay, this is our standard. This is what we want to, strive for. And, in the Western Hockey League, we would get monthly emails, or every couple of weeks we get an email reminder saying, hey, as we're approaching the playoffs, intensity is going to pick up. Make sure that we're, doing this, and this, and stuff of that. And, again, as the intensity goes up, so do us, right? We have to be prepared for more crap to hit the fan per se, right?
So what you're saying is when the NHL season starts, for all the fans, they should allow the officiating to warm up then also and have their training camp. Don't get so hard on them right off the bat.
Yeah, that's kind of what exhibition season's for, right? So hopefully...
So is that... this is a whole different question, but is that what they do to get ready for playoffs and then put away the whistle?
Well, if you're asking that question, I don't think so. I think ultimately, as officials, we want the players to decide the game, right? Like, the golden rule in any sport, and again, I'm a multi-sport official myself. I think we never want to be noticed out there if we can avoid it. But, and I remember after the Tim Peel situation happened, a few of the coaches that were interviewed and stuff like that kind of made the comment about, like, you know what, if they just called the rule book, or some of the TSN analysts said, like, if they called the rule book the way that the rule book is thing, but they need the players and teams to buy into that philosophy, right? Because you all know, I think you're the abnormal where you just be quiet and skate off the ice or go off the ice when you got a penalty. Because if you watch the highlights every night, it's like, there's definitely some verbal going at the officials as that guy goes in the box, like, are you effing kidding me? And, a few things like that, right?
I mean, I've mouthed off to some of the refs in the ball hockey Edmonton League here. So I've had my fair shares of being talked back to. So I don't always agree with it. I just meant more blatant calls where it's like a tripping, and I know it was like
obvious.
Or a hook or whatever it may be. But I have had my fair share where I will admit that even within the ball hockey Edmonton group, they had to release a letter. I believe it was about 1.5 to 2 years ago when the league was still active prior to COVID, of how you could not mouth off and say slurs or swears to certain officials. That's how bad it got. And it wasn't because of me. I'm not trying to imply that. Or maybe it was. I don't know. But it had happened where there were certain teams that were mouthing off. So I can understand that the amount of vulgarities that you get is unintended and not necessary. But we're just trying to get a sense of what the calls are as evidence. But Les, what are some of your thoughts on the matter?
So Les, is there accountability in umpiring then?
Yes, very much so. As a matter of fact, it was interesting the stuff Chris had said, and I'm sure there's a pre-game meeting with the officials, and they go over what to expect during the game. We do that in softball, and they do it in baseball. They probably do it for hockey as well. So they can, that's where people that have a tendency to dive are pointed out. So, you know, like who to watch for. What happened in the previous game? Was there, did number 5 go against number 4 and they were, you know, is there a tension there, right? What to watch for? There's so much pregame stuff that has to be discussed. That's why officials of any sport should be early if they're working with people. So you guys can go over the game plan for yourselves on what to look for. Does that mean that people put away the whistles? I don't think so. I can't see them doing that on purpose. But there again, the intensity level picks up at the playoff time. So are you going to call those little penalties that you deem big penalties? And there again, the game's moving so quickly in hockey. Your point of view from where the referee is standing compared to sitting back and seeing the whole play develop is another thing, right? It's a tough being a hockey official. In softball, it's a lot slower, so it's not as bad. But the pregame to me is very important, and that's why I think a lot of the officials already have, I would say, a preconceived idea of what's going to happen during the game. And they try to let it flow as good as they can.
Okay, so we were. Let's continue with this. So let's go around. So Pavel, you were talking about the personality of the game, right? The names on the back for all the officials, so we know who they are. I grew up and I mean, I knew Donut Skohorsky, right? I mean, I don't know anyone that loves officials ever unless they make the call in their way. But as a fan, it's only for the home team, right? You know, you're happy because when it's not your team, you're never happy. Other than what I know from a fan's point of view and also from playing hockey, I never played higher in Div 2 and Rec. But one thing that I've learned is if there's one call, there always seems to be a makeup call. And it's so well known in hockey that we make funny commercials about it, that we could make a call to make up for a call for absolutely no good reason. And when you watch it, I don't know if it's a bias in our head. So I'd like you guys to kind of speak around that. Before we do that, so Pavel, tell us why you think there should be names on jerseys. So why you want the refs to be more involved, the officials to be more involved in the game of hockey?
Well, first of all, I'm on a track now to get every single jersey in the NHL, so I kind of want a ref jersey. And if Chris has one, I will definitely get a Hartley one. If you can get it somewhere for free, that'd be awesome. Plus, then you guys can also, like, this is incentive and economics. Why not sell jerseys for the refs, for your favorite refs, and then have like a third jersey where you can have like different colors, like for St. Patrick's Day, it's black and green, right? Or I don't know. I'm thinking outside the box.
And, you know, let's raise money for cancer. So the refs and linesmen, we buy their pink jerseys. Yeah. I'd love to see Chris in a pink jersey.
Well, I've actually seen him in a pink jersey because we actually have it for softball. We have.
Oh, you do?
Yes, we do.
Do you guys sell it?
Well, I've got one. Actually, one of the other umpires is borrowing it right now. So,
Well, you can donate it to Two Guys in Hockey Talk.
So back to your earlier question, and then I'll let Chris take over. Is the reason I would like to see names on the back is because I tried to learn the game as much as possible, and the best way to do that is to learn about who's on the ice. And it's kind of tough when one team has one logo and the other has another, but you could see a number, right? You could see the last name as you see in the back there. I'd like to see who the ref and the linesmen are, so you get a sense of what their style of play is. Do they let things go, or are they, or do they call certain things, right? So that would be my incentive, but also what I said earlier. But Chris, what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, again, going from personal experience, again, I started off in the Western Hockey League. We were name bars only, and then because it was late, early 2000s type thing, and then they went to kind of the name bar and the number, or actually no, we went 1 year with just the number, and then we went to name bar and number the next year. And that was right around the NHL switch to numbers only. I'm a fan like yourself, where I would love to, when I turn on the Flames game or the Oilers game or whatever game that is on, the TV, I'd love to be able to look and see, who's working the game. And if you're not watching the broadcast right in the first about 30 seconds of the hockey game, when they put it across the little ticker that says referees, linesmen, right? I'm doing the same as everyone else, and like, number 40 or number 83 or whatever is on the ice. And then I have to go to like a website and scouting the refs and see who's the officials for tonight's game. Boom, there it is, those 4 people, right? So I'm like you, like, especially for me, when I go to an actual hockey game, I'm not really watching the game. I'm watching the officials, or it was, when I was active. I'd go to watch what they were doing to see their, techniques and a few things like that, like you said, Pavel. But I think the reason they went away from that a little bit is because they went from the 3 referee to the 4 referee system. Because back in, when I was coming up through minor hockey and into junior hockey and stuff like that, you knew certain referees, and this referee let this stuff go, or this referee liked to call this. And I remember even talking to some coaches in the Western Hockey League over my career that would say, like, they have scouting reports on the officials. They knew that if referee X was reffing, to tell their players to shut their mouths and don't say anything after work, because he'll give you 10 misconducts quite quickly. Or this guy doesn't like the retaliatory slashes, or, they literally scouted the referees to benefit their team.
Love it.
But again, as I think when they went to the 4 officials, they again took away some of that. I don't want to say that game management, because again, we all know, like, with the one referee, you're controlling the show, and you reffed it the way you reffed it, right? And you had control of that game. Kind of use the analogy of like a bird in your hand, and if you squeeze it too tight or call too many penalties, you kill it. But if you don't squeeze it tight enough, the bird flies away, and then you have chaos, right? So you have to manage that game. And I think it's gone away from that a little bit, because it's now 2 guys working together as referees. And, they want to have similar styles or similar game management strategies, when there's the 2 referee system or 4 official system, whatever way you want to talk about it. So I wish they would go back to name bars personally. Like, I would love to, because again, for me, who loves officials and likes the officiating, I would like to know, it's Steve Kazari on the ice, or Wes McCauley, or whoever it is, right? It would just make it a lot easier for me, save me a few seconds, and without having to look it up.
So when they're skating on the ice and you've got kind of 2 referees and 2 linesmen, usually between the 2 referees, is there one that's more of a senior that takes the lead, or do you guys go in sync? Like, how does that work? Do you kind of determine that pre-game?
It's not determined pre-game. Again, regardless if there's a rookie or a senior guy, again, the expectation from leagues is that you're, officiating at the same standard, right? Now, don't get me wrong. Obviously, if you got a guy that's worked, a lot more games, maybe worked Memorial Cups in the Western Hockey League or whatever it is with a rookie or a guy that's new, there might be times where that senior official has to take charge a little bit more and, and use his experience to be like, that's a penalty. My partner didn't call it. I'm throwing my arm up, So there is some of that, obviously, right? And sometimes they're paired up for that purposes to help mentor and develop, right? But The expectation from the league is that ideally is that they're both, as you see it, you call it, right? And then in the dressing room between periods and, after the game and even before the game, like Les sort of talked about that pregame, we've got scouting reports, we've got, scouting packages that the scouts would have and say, oh, on this team, like, hey, we know we're doing this team and, Sean Avery's playing, right? And Sean's a bit of a, crap disturber and, guy that we, as a linesman, you need to know when he's on the ice because he's going to be causing trouble, right? Or the Cassians or the, even Matthew Tkachuk, right? If you think you're here in Calgary, where I'm based of, right? Like, that he's going to be in the mix after the whistle. As linesmen, you need to know where he is on the ice. And as referees, you're having that same conversation about, hey, who do we need to be aware of? So like Les said, maybe there is a little bit of that preconceived notion that, hey, we got to be watching for this guy to do something that crosses the line, but they're not going out there and saying that we're going to make sure that we penalize them.
Yeah.
But it's just that shorter leash, I think, with those guys. And, between intermissions, you're talking and saying, I didn't like that call that you made, or, what did you see on that, and that growth and development, right?
So Les, what's your thoughts around like the whole personality? Should the officiating really be pulling their personality, have name bars? Should they be allowed to be more of a part of the game? We're almost going robotic. I know Chris and I were talking off air yesterday, actually, and I heard about the robotic umpires that they're working on right now. I'm scared that linesmen will lose their job because the offside, they're going to get robotic, linesmen or something.
Yeah, you can you can only do so much when it comes to that kind of stuff, robotic stuff. Let's face it, there's a lot of things that happen in a hockey game that a robot could not do, right? Besides, games would last 5 hours long if you had to wait for every call that would be made. And then if you want to go by rule book, then there would be like 1,000 penalties a game. I mean, because the game's moving so quick, you just get a stick close to a guy's leg and the robot would call a tripping penalty, right? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. As far as umpiring is concerned, I can't see that happening. Yeah, maybe they can do something with the strike zone or something like that, but other than that, I can't see us going that road. I mean, they've already got video replay for umpires.
Yeah.
And same with hockey, right? I mean, they've already got that covered as far as I'm concerned. Do they have to go farther? I don't think so. And listening to some radio broadcasts, it was interesting. I think it was Elliot Friedman said that, how do you get the officials better? Well, why don't you pay them more? Like, you're paying all these guys millions of dollars to play hockey, and these referees are getting paid really squat, and they're the ones that are getting all the shit. Oh, pardon the expression, but
beep.
I mean, they the players, the coaches, that's going to be a bleep. But the players and the coaches, they're always blaming the referees for something, right? Or they cost us the game or whatever. Of course, they can't say that in the media or they get fined right away and that kind of stuff. But, you want them to get better. Well, give them an incentive that, have more money. Yeah, not throwing money at the situation isn't going to completely remove all the stuff, but it'll definitely keep your better officials and hopefully train more people, because the money will draw more people and maybe you'll get more officials and better officials. You never know.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, if I could just jump in on that topic that Les just talked about. Like, they are getting paid a decent amount of money. Don't get us wrong. Like, they are, six figures, and they're doing good, but it is a full-time gig, right? Like, some of the officials are on the road 20 some days out of their 30-day month, right? So, they're traveling lots, they're doing lots of that. I have a few friends and stuff that I've obviously officiated over the years that have moved on to that level, and trust me, they're loving their profession.
Yeah.
Again, anytime you can, if I could officiate full time, I'd gladly do it. But and like Les says, throwing money at them wouldn't necessary, but they don't get a chance to practice their game. Like, officiating is the one thing that you don't get to, like, we don't have imaginary pylons and people out there that are playing around, right? And the NHL has, over the last handful of years, they've really taken some different routes to try and recruit. I remember a few years back, there was a guy that worked in Oilers exhibition game. It was his first ever game officiating, period, was an NHL exhibition game.
Wow.
Because he had played semi-pro, hockey, and they have these combines in like Buffalo and a few places like that where they'll bring in these former semi-pro hockey players because they know the game, they understand the emotions and all this of that from a player's perspective, right? And they, again, kind of fast track them through the NHL or AHL levels and work their way, in a year or so they're into the NHL, right? Because they're like, hey, the fitness side, you're a good skater, the game, all these attributes that we want from our officials. Yep. Now you're, but again, my concern with that, and when I first heard this, I was blown away. I'm like, the guy's never worked a minor hockey game, let alone a junior hockey game or anything like that, and he's working an NHL exhibition game. Like, there's a lot of stuff you learn on the job, right? And you can't just be like, yeah, here you go.
Yeah.
Go at it, right? But like, I do know there's a few guys, like there's a referee out of, he was out of Medicine Hat, Chris Schlenker is his name, but he was a Med Hat canine police, and he played Seattle Thunderbirds, went into semi-pro, came back, went to, became a police officer, and in about 7 years he was into the NHL.
Wow.
Five of those being in the Western Hockey League, and he was, worked Memorial Cup, and fast tracked, right? But he was good, right? And that was before the combine situation that they started, right? So he's been in the league now a couple of years. So, really good official, but, how do you give them practice? How do you get the better, other than that feedback from the retired guys, that are, helping out, or, the recently retired guys that come back as officiating coaches, and, learning on the job. And I hate to say it, they're not perfect. As most fans know, officials are never perfect. Even if, we are looking through rose-colored glasses as our hometown fans, right? So,
do you guys think?
Well, neither are the players. Neither are the players. They're not perfect either.
Yeah.
That's fair. That's fair. And the players, they have their own flaws too. So, do you guys think then that there's a big jump in difference between some of the, like the pro leagues and then the leagues just beneath them, so the WHL, the OHL, the CHL, or even for you, Les, between, Major League Baseball versus the farm teams? Like, do you see a big difference because of players who are wanting to make an impression to get up there so they're less likely to yap? Or is it the same? Do you see a similar amount of calls, or like, what would you say?
As far as ball is concerned, you're probably going through just as many calls, whether it's Major League Baseball, minor baseball, softball, fastball, slow pitch. You're going to have just as many calls. There again, Major League level, anything that's the higher elite level of any sport is probably easier to officiate than your lower stuff, like your recreational stuff, because they know how to play the game, right?
Yeah.
Whereas the recreational players don't always know. And so one of the things is anticipating plays as an official, anticipating where the play is going to happen, right? If you have people that have no idea how to play ball or play hockey, how do you anticipate that stuff?
Yeah.
Right? Because they don't know what they're supposed to be doing. Whereas the higher levels, they all know where they're supposed to be and what they're supposed to do, right?
Yeah.
So it's, to me, it's a lot easier to officiate the higher levels.
Okay, but so, and to add to that, and then Chris can also jump in at any point, and Evan, you as well, is what would be the difference then between, and again, I can't speak too much about baseball, is regular season and playoffs, and we can even talk about what had happened with the Houston Astros, but kind of how do you go about dealing with that kind of situations when the team's trying to find any edge they can on bettering themselves so that they can win, whether rightly or wrongly?
Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with Les's comment about the higher levels are definitely easier. It's a way more structured game at the higher levels.
Yeah.
And again, they're professionals, right? They are. It's a business. That's the difference, obviously, between as you go from the elite level down to the lower, even Western Hockey League. Again, it's a business for those coaches because their livelihoods are on the line and stuff like that. But for those players, it's not as much. And as you progress up through the minor leagues of baseball or the American Hockey League and stuff like that, those guys are trying to fight to get to the NHL. So you might see some different, situations as you progress up because they want to make a difference, or they want to show that, hey, I deserve to be up into the NHL or the major leagues of baseball. But once they get there, it's pretty structured and it's a little bit easier to officiate. Like even if you're watching the next time you watch an NHL game, if the commercials or if when the whistle goes, if you watch the linesman type thing, when we were in the Western Hockey League, the whistle would go, we'd have to like fly in and make sure there's no pushing or shoving going on, right? Whereas in the NHL, it's like, a lot of times they're just, slowly get there because they know nothing's going to happen until it actually does happen, right? Like there's less likelihood that, that those things are going to happen, right? Because it's like, the guys aren't going to waste their energy unless they really are trying to do something intentionally, right? So, I definitely think it's a little bit more easier to officiate because the passes are crisper, the play is a bit more structured and, systems, right? Just higher quality of play because it's higher quality of player. The speed's definitely faster, like when you get guys like McDavid and a few of those other speedsters out there going 35, 40 kilometers an hour up the ice surface, and you got to make a split-second decision on an offside or, a penalty or not a penalty. The speed's moving, especially down in those corners, right? The referees are trying to avoid and get, maneuver around the bodies, definitely that way. But I think if it's back to your sort of kind of question there, Pavel, about the I just lost my train of thought. About the
playoffs, and regular season.
Yeah, the playoffs, there's a little bit more on the line, right? Because it's, win or go home for some games. The intensity's gone up. But I think, ultimately the referees want the players to make that decision or, make the result of the game be because of the players. So that's maybe where you see some calls, the whistle go away or those less calls. They have to make sure it's a for sure penalty, for that thing. But if the league and the teams all bought in and said, hey, we want it called, penalty in the first 2 minutes of the first period is a penalty in the last minute and a half in a tie game in the game 7, if they said this is what we want and we will support you 100% as a league-wide message, I'm sure, the referees would be glad to say, yeah, okay, great. But we all know that now the way it's been is, if they make a call tight game, they have 18,000 fans in the crowd that are pissed off and that the whole team is, because it's like, oh, and then the puck goes in the net and you cost us that game, or those other comments that have been brought up earlier, right? So, and
I think you hit on a really good point that we're gonna have to get ready to put a wrap on this, guys. Like we're into overtime like all the time. We should call this Two Guys in Hockey Talk overtime, but that's already been stolen. TSN took it out from under us, under our wings, so we couldn't use the overtime little slogan. So one of the things I always have wondered about the playoffs when it comes to officiating is because there's more on the line, They're trying to let them, whereas they're trying to regulate that game to get them ready for the playoffs. That's kind of how I've always looked at it. But I do have to say, Pavel, do you remember the game we went to, 2017, Oilers and Ducks, those last 3 goals? And we laugh about Ryan Kessler. I think it was Kessler, was it not?
Yes, it
Holding
was.
Ken Talbot's pad. We always joke that, he must have taken it home with him. The interesting part is, how could the refs not call that? How could the video judges not see it? I mean, it was frustrating as a fan, but the refs helped make that game. And as much as I hate that the Oilers lost, it made it exciting. And that element, I think back to, with some of the stuff when guys would like battling Billy Smith and I'm because being a goalie and Ron Hextall and slacking, they wait till the officials are looking another way and they do all their stuff. And, it's almost like watching wrestling sometimes, when they're kind of, so anyway, that would make a lot of sense. So why don't we just have one last thing from you guys, all 3 of you, get you guys to share before we wrap up here. Makeup calls, are they real or are they a figment of the fans' imagination? Les, let's go ahead. You can wrap this one up with us to start.
I truly believe that it doesn't exist. Yes, it doesn't look that way.
You're calling millions and millions of fans wrong.
Yes, I am. Because I know in softball or in baseball,
yeah,
it shouldn't ever happen, ever. I mean, any official that thinks that way should not be an official, as far as I'm concerned, as far as baseball or softball is concerned. And hockey, it should not be thought that way. It's like you get 10 close plays at first base, and they all go against the same team. Are you going to make up a call and make a close one against the other team? No, that just doesn't make sense to me. In hockey, you think by watching the games, you think that that's what's happening, but I don't believe so. Of course, everyone's watching for that because the announcers on the hockey games are going, oh, well, they've had 4 penalties in a row. You can expect the other team to get one. It doesn't matter how close it is. It's going to be a penalty.
And it happens.
I mean, holy cow. Really?
Chris?
Yeah, if I can, I would kind of support Les in that, saying like, I don't think they are. I think what does happen, and from my experience from in the dressing rooms and the talks, as officials, we aren't like, oh, hey, we've had 4 against Edmonton. We got to make sure we find one against Calgary next or whatever it is, right? Like, but what we might say, or what I've heard say, is like, hey, we got to make sure that we don't miss the next one. The next penalty that is, we got to make sure that we don't miss it, right? Like, right. So you're maybe a little more aware of, what they're doing, but you're not necessarily going out looking for that one. Hey, we've got 3 against them and 1 here. We got to make sure we get 2 more. Because at the end of the game, we want to have even numbers of penalties for each thing. But over my probably thousands of games that I've done through minor hockey and junior hockey over the years, I think there's plenty of games where I've looked at the score sheet after the game, and it's like, 10 penalty minutes, or whatever it might be, right? Like, they're pretty even. And it just happens to be that way, whether you wanted it to be or not. So I would say no, they aren't necessarily decided upon technique or strategy.
No makeup calls. Okay, Val?
I got to agree there with Tim, boy. But I want to say something about Chris. I've never actually known an official that can actually do both softball and referee hockey at the highest level, basically on the same day. He was at a Canadian championship here in Calgary, and we also had the World Juniors here, I believe, the tryout camp, and he had to go be a linesman for one of the international events. Tell us about that one, Chris.
Yeah, I guess it was about 2016. So the summer camp was held at Winsport here in Calgary, and yeah, I was working a national championship for softball, and I had to ask for an absence for the afternoon or the scheduling for a day because I was called by Hockey Canada to go in and officiate the World Junior kind of summer selection camp game. So I did ball in the morning and then popped over to do hockey a couple hours later. So yeah, it's, like I said, it's all the juggling. I'm a glutton for punishment. I like to be abused, I guess, verbally. So.
Well, as a person who barely steps on the ice yearly, I'm going to disagree and say, as a fan, there are makeup calls, and you're both wrong. You don't know what you're talking about. Your experience and your history in the sports just means nothing. No, I'm kidding. I honestly think there are makeup calls, but that's only because if you look at usually the end of the night, how many penalties there are called on each team, it's usually even. Rarely is it, it's a 5-1, right? And it should be where if a team is more disciplined, they shouldn't be called. But sometimes you think I think the challenge is like a makeup call versus a soft call. Which one is it? Are you giving a soft call? Well, it was a light slash on the hands, or it was an accidental trip. Because like there are some blatant calls and then there's some accidental soft calls. And I think that's where you need to differentiate. But Evan, go ahead, finish us off.
Oh, man. I love it. Well, I like to agree with my companion, two guy. Okay, so I'm going to be right in the middle. I'm going to be a centrist. And I'm going to say there's makeup calls, but not on purpose. And when you guys were talking, I actually do get that when you mentioned about Calgary. So, hey, make sure we don't miss any. And I think what happens is, as a fan, you're focusing, because anytime we get a call, how often I've been with other people and they're all hanging out, and the team that we're cheering for, gets a penalty and they're all mad. And I'm like, oh, why did that guy take that penalty? And they're like, that's not a penalty, and then the other team, we do something and it's never a penalty, of course, right? And I think it's the mind. I think psychologically there is something that makes it even itself out, but it's not done with purpose. And let me come back to Peel. I don't think what he did was on purpose, and I think that the NHL was wrong for how they handled it. And Gary, you heard me. Well, guys, thanks so much, Chris. Les, thanks so much. This has been a blast. Very educational. Pavel, not often we get to educate our crowd.
That's true with you. It's usually uninformative. It's just blah blah blah.
Oh, blah, blah, blah. Well, guys, thanks so much. If you're following us here today, guys, can you follow, like, share on your Facebook and social media? We appreciate everyone coming. Appreciate our guests. Thanks for being a part of tonight. And I'm going to say, in the meantime and in between time,
You're 6 on the ice. Stay safe, everyone.
Cheers, guys. Take care.
Thanks, guys.
Take care.
Right.